Have you ever stopped to think about how many times a day you say yes when you really mean no? How many times do you answer a call even though you're exhausted, reply to a text even though you need some time for yourself, or accept yet another commitment even though your schedule is packed? If you identify with this situation, then this video is exactly for you. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history, observed something fascinating about human behavior. When we stop being constantly available to others, our entire lives transform. And I'm not just talking about having more free time. I'm talking about a profound shift in how we see ourselves, how others see us, and most importantly, how we build healthier, more authentic relationships. Today we'll explore this powerful idea together and discover why setting boundaries isn't selfish, but rather an act of psychological maturity that can revolutionize your life. We'll understand what it truly means to be available in Jung's view, why it harms us so much, and most importantly, how we can change this in a practical and conscious way. To understand Jung's idea, we must first distinguish between two very different types of availability. There is genuine availability, that which arises from love, true compassion, and a sincere desire to help. And there is compulsive availability, which is quite different. Compulsive availability happens when we say yes out of fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, fear of appearing selfish, or even fear of being alone. It's when our availability comes not from a place of generosity, but from a desperate need for approval and acceptance. Jung noticed that many people develop what he called a persona, a social mask we wear to be accepted. And one of the most common characteristics of this persona is always being available, always willing, always saying yes. The problem is that when we live too much through this mask, we lose touch with who we really are underneath. Imagine you have a friend who always accepts all your invitations, never disagrees with anything you say, and is always available when you need them. At first it might seem wonderful, but after a while you start to wonder, who is this person really? What do they really think and feel? Constant availability, paradoxically, can make us less interesting and authentic people. Jung also observed that when we are always available to others, we end up completely unavailable to ourselves. We don't have time to process our own emotions, to reflect on our needs, or to simply be silent with ourselves. This dynamic creates a vicious cycle where we become increasingly dependent on external validation because we lose connection with our own internal compass. Let's talk about what happens to our minds when we're constantly available to everyone but ourselves. Jung identified a process he called individuation, which is essentially the development of our unique and authentic personality over the course of our lives. When we're constantly available to others, we disrupt this fundamental process. The first price we pay is emotional exhaustion. I'm not just talking about physical fatigue, but a deeper kind of exhaustion. It's when you feel like you're giving, but getting nothing in return, not even from yourself. You become like a well that everyone can tap into but never refills. Jung realized that this creates an interesting phenomenon. We begin to develop unconscious resentment. On the outside, we keep smiling and saying yes, but inside, a part of us is furious. This repressed anger doesn't go away. It builds up and eventually explodes in unexpected ways, damaging the very relationships we were trying to preserve through our constant availability. Another psychological price is the loss of one's own identity. When you're constantly adapting to the needs and expectations of others, you stop knowing what you truly want, like, or need. It's as if you were a chameleon that has changed colors so many times that you've forgotten what your original color was. Jung observed that this also affects our ability to make decisions. People who are always available often suffer from chronic indecision because they have lost touch with their own inner voice. They are constantly looking for external clues about what they should do, think, or feel. And perhaps the highest price is the superficiality of relationships. When you're always available, People don't have to work hard for your attention or affection. This can create one-sided relationships where you become a kind of emotional resource that people use when they need it but don't necessarily value it. Here we come to the heart of Jung's observation. When you stop being constantly available, you force a complete reorganization of your relationships and your very identity. It's like removing a pillar from a building. The entire structure must readapt. The first shift happens within yourself. When you start saying no to some things, you automatically say yes to others. And often that yes is to yourself, to your time, your energy, your needs. Jung saw this as a crucial step in the individuation process because you are taking responsibility for your own life instead of letting it be directed by the demands of others. Setting boundaries also has a profound effect on how you see yourself. When you realize you can say no, and the world won't end, when you see that you can set boundaries and people will still like you, and if they don't, maybe those relationships aren't so healthy after all, you develop a sense of personal power you may never have experienced before. In relationships, the changes are even more dramatic. When you're no longer always available, people start to value the time they spend with you more. It's the basic law of supply and demand applied to human relationships. Something that's always available loses perceived value, while something scarcer becomes more precious. Jung also noted that when you set healthy boundaries, you attract healthier relationships. People who respect your boundaries and don't get angry when you say no are exactly the kind of people you want in your life. Meanwhile, people who get irritated when you're not always available reveal a lot about their own insecurities and unresolved needs. Another fundamental shift occurs in the quality of your presence. When you're not always rushing to meet everyone's needs, when you have time to process your own experiences and emotions, you become a more interesting, more centered, and more present person when you truly choose to connect with someone. Now let's talk about something Jung considered inevitable. When you start setting boundaries, some people in your life won't like it at all, and understanding why this happens is crucial to staying on track. Jung had a concept called projection, which is when we attribute qualities, feelings, or responsibilities to others that are actually our own. Many people project onto us the responsibility for their emotional well-being. When you are always available, you are unknowingly supporting these projections. When you stop being constantly available, these people have to confront their own insecurities and needs. And that's uncomfortable. It's much easier to blame you for changing or being selfish than to take responsibility for your own emotional stability. Jung noted that this is especially common in codependent relationships, where there is an unconscious agreement that one person will always be the giver and the other always the receiver. When the giver begins to set limits, the entire system needs to be renegotiated, and this generates resistance. Some people may try to guilt-trip you by using phrases like, "You've changed," "You don't care about me anymore," or "You're being selfish." Jung would say these are manipulative attempts, conscious or unconscious, to get you back into your old pattern of constant availability. It's important to understand that this resistance doesn't necessarily mean these people are bad. It could simply mean they haven't yet developed the emotional maturity to handle more balanced relationships. Some people will grow with you in this process, others may not. Jung also observed an interesting phenomenon. People who truly love and care about you may initially resist change, but eventually come to respect you more when they see you're establishing healthy boundaries. True love wants to see the other person grow and become more authentic, even if that means less availability. The key is to stay strong during this period of resistance, remembering that you are not responsible for others' emotional reactions to your healthy choices. And since we're talking about change and personal growth, how about you give the channel a boost? Subscribe and like this video. It really helps me keep bringing you content like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had this experience of setting limits and noticing the changes it brought? Now let's get to the point. How you can start applying Jung's wisdom to your real life. Understanding theory is one thing, but putting it into practice in your daily life is another. The first step, according to Jung, is to develop self-awareness. You need to start noticing when you're saying yes out of fear rather than genuine desire. Try a little experiment. Before responding to any request, pause for a few seconds and ask yourself, am I accepting this because I truly want it, or because I'm afraid of how the person will react if I say no? Jung always emphasized the importance of small steps. Don't try to change everything at once, as this can be very challenging for both you and those around you. Start by choosing low-risk situations to practice saying no. Maybe it's declining an invitation to something you really don't want to do, or not immediately responding to a message when you need some time to yourself. A very useful technique is what we can call a reflective pause. When someone makes a request, respond with, "Let me think about it and I'll get back to you in a few hours," or "I'll check my schedule and let you know." This gives you time to get out of autopilot mode and truly decide whether you want to accept or not. Jung also spoke about the importance of understanding your own needs. Many people who are always available to others no longer even know what they themselves need. Set aside regular time, even if it's just 15 minutes a day, to be in silence with yourself, without distractions, and ask yourself, what do I need today? What would be good for me? Another practical strategy is to create what Jung might call protective rituals, routines that ensure you have time for yourself. This might mean not checking your messages before a certain time in the morning, setting aside a weeknight just for yourself, or having a weekend day where you don't accept social commitments. Jung also emphasized the importance of communicating your boundaries clearly and kindly. You don't need to give long explanations about why you're saying no. A simple, "I can't do it this time," or "I'm not available," is enough. People who truly care about you will accept this without hesitation. And remember, setting boundaries is a skill that develops with practice. At first it may feel uncomfortable, even selfish, but Jung would say this discomfort is natural. You're undoing patterns that may be years or decades old. Be patient with yourself during this process. Jung taught us that failing to be constantly available isn't an act of selfishness, but rather of psychological maturity and self-love. When you stop saying yes to everything and everyone, you're saying yes to your own individuation, to your growth as a unique and authentic person. The changes that occur when you establish healthy boundaries are profound and lasting. You develop more balanced and genuine relationships, discover who you truly are beneath others' expectations, and build a solid foundation of self-esteem that doesn't depend on constant approval from others. Of course, this process isn't easy. There will be resistance, both internal and external. Some people may not like your new stance, and you may experience moments of self-doubt yourself. But Jung reminds us that psychological growth always involves some discomfort. It's the price we pay for becoming who we truly are. The truth is that when you learn not to always be available, you become available in a much richer and more meaningful way. Your presence becomes more valuable because it's chosen, not automatic. Your relationships become deeper because they're based on reciprocity, not dependence. So, if you identified with this content, give it a try. Start small, be kind to yourself, but start. Discover how liberating it is to be able to say no without guilt, and how transformative it is to build a life based on your own choices, not on others' expectations. Because ultimately, as Jung observed, when you stop being constantly available to everyone else, you finally become available to the most important person, yourself. And that may be the most revolutionary change you'll ever make in your life.